Okay. Hopefully.
Battery.
If you can get it open. Yes. I'll become an engineer tonight. Oh yeah, we got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your time.
Yeah, I see. So why? Is that behind my card is set up?
Okay. Hi, Damon. How are you?
How are you?
Good. Very good.
No, I don't want Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay. I don't. Oh, no. I'm going to turn.
Did you see it?
No, I don't.
Don't see any.
We have one really short. Yeah, we have a mock-up of the sign too.
Sure. Yes.
So right now,
Signage here.
this is called. That's what I'm saying, you're coming this way.
This side is-
Are you trying to explain the right here? Exactly what it is. Like I go down Route 1, house across the street, go treat.
It's not a big deal. Well,
Well,
no,
it can't be, it's
Right,
that,
right.
it can't be, that's against the.
Well, when you go, if I'm on film and the sign looks like that, does that mean the words are here or?
yes, there's also one out by the demonstration on the road.
Why, why not up to the whole plastic sign that is light.
Well, it helps with the information on the very big change message.
So I have that one.
Who's this here for, the student?
Students, maybe?
Well, you can't see it, you won't be able to see it, you can't even see the school until you're at the road.
That's
And it's 5 seconds to go across, I kinda, this can't, each message has to be on there for 30 seconds.
We're trying to be.
I hope not.
Well, the point is, it's going to be on. For example, today's school closure. Could have been flashing. We have an Anglo to be on there.
So it changes its message, so it's like flash. or
Not flashing, not flashing.
This light is illuminating. The message is
It's all good.
illuminating.
We can back it.
Well, there's already no.
So it's a 12-foot sign. It's a 12-foot.
Oh, okay. It doesn't say Morrisville High School, it's solid. So is that into regular lead and permanent letters or the whole site? In the digital light or in, that's like, so like that's very, oh, it does have those.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is those.
So he's
So light is light, so you have to on.
So I just wanted to do that. And I didn't even see it.
I did not.
About the neighbors that live here across the street. It's not going to enhance their values, it doesn't do what it's not.
Well covered.
This is 75.
I'm so excited.
This is 75.
And I drove by the school, I'm like, those deer statues are, I thought it was a good joke. Until I realized Andy and friends started running down Pax Avenue, where it closed. I thought somebody put it years ago.
Wow.
So what's the purpose?
That was a good dry run for you. Yeah. Stay awake. Stay awake. I think a lot of us feel that way, to be honest with you.
At least four. That would be nice if that would happen.
There we go.
I'm not counting on it though. Only for the list.
What's your position? She'll just move for Ralph, that's all. Okay. That's
Yeah,
it. You
just
just
say-
cross out Susan.
No,
You just
call
cross-
his name
cross
and
out.
say he's absent,
Absent. That's it.
and then change that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that'll be Maureen Carlton.
I had to get my count.
Is it Carlton or Carlson?
Carlton.
Ton.
T-O-N, right.
Thank
How do you spell that? C-A-R-L.
Thank you.
Maureen. M-A-U-R-E-N. C-A-R-L-T-O-N. That's it. There we go. Did that get us to the finish line? Okay. You folks ready? Yeah. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to bring this session of the Morrisville Zoning Hearing Board to order Tuesday, September 4th, 2018. First up, Mr. Secretary, may I have a roll call, please?
Okay. Chairman Steve Schmelzer,
Here.
Secretary Wayne O'Neill here, Member Ralph Persico, absent, alternate member Susan Zukowski,
Present.
Solicitor Maureen Carlton,
Present.
Zoning Officer Keystone Municipal Services Incorporated, Stephen Ware, Recording Zoning Secretary Lorraine Robson.
Okay, thank you. Next up, may I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of, did we go through them at last meeting? Or they're not complete?
They're not ready.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Wait a minute. Okay.
All right.
Next,
Notice is hereby given that the Morrisville Borough Zoning Hearing Board will hold a public hearing on Tuesday evening, September 4th, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. in the council chambers of the Morrisville Municipal Building, 35 Union Street, Morrisville, Pennsylvania. In the matter of the application of the School District of the Borough of Morrisville, 550 West Palmer Street, Morrisville, Pennsylvania, 19067, or the premises located at 550 West Palmer Street, Morrisville, Pennsylvania, 19067, county tax parcel 24-004-156. Applicant is requesting a variance from Chapter 465, Article 7, Section 54 of the Morrisville Borough Zoning Ordinance to allow an electronic board sign in the CS1 Community Service Zoning District. Applicant also seeks any other variances which may deem necessary for approval of the project. Documents relating to this matter will be made available for inspection during normal business hours at the office of the Zoning Department at Morrisville Borough Hall, 35 Union Street, Morrisville, Pennsylvania, 19067. All persons to be heard in favor of or in opposition to the granting of this application may be heard at the above time and place. Morrisville Zoning Hearing Board.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Next up for the zoning officer, was the notice properly posted and advertised?
Yes, letters went out and the property was posted.
Okay, thank you very much. And next up, we can begin to establish party status.
At this time, if anybody in the audience would like to become a party to this matter, not just voicing opposition or support of the matter, but becoming a party to this matter, if they would approach the microphone and give us your name and address.
What does that mean, become a party?
Means that you would receive direct notice of the decision of the board. It would be mailed to you. And you become a party to the matter itself.
Okay. But if you're not a party, you still can speak in favor?
Absolutely. It does not preclude anyone from speaking in favor of or in opposition to.
Should I just come up?
Yes.
Okay. Georgia Sankmars, 227 West Franklin Street. I'd like to become a party to this. CINQ hyphen M as in Mary, AR, S as in Sam.
Please.
So help me God, I do.
Thank you.
Can I just have a couple of questions about Ms. Sinkmars? Her address is on Franklin Street. In terms of proximity to the location, I'm not sure if she qualifies for party status, so I would just ask for clarification about the how far that extends in terms of being a party with respect to the particular application.
Mr. Ware, can you tell us who was notified?
I'm familiar with the street. Do you have our list? We got our list.
Thank you. We'll verify for you.
CINQ-MAR? I fade out on that stuff.
Yeah, she was not on the list.
I
Okay.
sent out 50 letters,
Okay.
proximity of that area.
Okay.
Oh, you go first.
And then I would object to the granting of party status.
Understood. The objection is that you are not necessarily an affected resident. You're a resident of the borough, but you're not necessarily affected. Did you receive a letter directly from the?
I did not.
You did not. Okay. So at this point, we're going to remove you as a party to the matter, but that does not preclude you from, again, when we have public comment, for speaking in favor or against. And the reason is because you are not necessarily within the affected area of the applicant.
Even though I drive by it every day?
Even though you drive by, your residence is not
Okay. That's fair.
within proximity to.
Okay.
But again, you will be able to speak at the appropriate time.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay?
Yes.
That's quite all right. Thank you.
Okay, next, if you have, Dave, I'm sorry.
Mr. Trulove.
Trulove.
And before.
If you could,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Before Mr. Trulove starts, I'd like to enter into the record exhibits on behalf of this board. Exhibit B1 will be the application. Exhibit B2 will be the notice that was read. Exhibit B3 will be the applicable provisions of the Morrisville Borough zoning ordinance, specifically Section 456-54 and Article 10, Table 465-17 for variances. Are there any objections to these
No objection.
exhibits? Thank you. And at this point, we can turn it over
We
to
can
Mr.
proceed with
Truelove.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, presentation. members of the Zoning Hearing Board, members of the public. My name is David Truelove. I'm the solicitor for the Borough School District of the Borough of Morrisville. We'll briefly describe what our request is, and hopefully, and then through testimony from the school board president, Damon Miller, from the superintendent, Jason Harris, and from our operations director, David May, we give you a full breadth of what our application is about, so you have a good idea as to why we're requesting the relief we are and the appropriateness of the request. And to clarify the record, I think the first variance, which has been noted for the record, is that we're requesting in the CS1 district this illuminated sign, which is, as we understand the reading of the zoning ordinance, is only allowed in the I district, I believe. So that's the use variance we would request there. There's also arguably, I think we put it in our application, or at least it's referenced informally, a dimensional variance. I would call it dimensional, although it's really not in terms of dimensions or setbacks, but the sign that we're proposing would be perpendicular to the street, and there'll be reasons why we'll explain that. That's also literally at variance with your zoning ordinance, and there are reasons why we were requesting that, but it's perpendicular, not parallel. So that will be another variance that we would request for purposes of tonight's hearing. Briefly, if you've, all of you have been in Morrisville for quite some time, you're probably familiar with the school district building, which houses intermediate school, the middle school, intermediate and middle school, and the high school, but also the administration offices. So it's really the nerve center for the school district. Attached to the district building out front is an old sign that's about 26 feet off the ground attached to the building. It's partially obscured by some trees. It's very difficult from time to time to change in terms of the message on it, especially in the wintertime when it's snowy or icy or windy. Doesn't mean it can't be changed, but unfortunately in this day and age of information access, the school district feels, as will be seen by other districts as well, that's very helpful to have more constant and real-time information. Today's early heat closing is a perfect example. Something where the school district was closed early, and it would have been helpful to have information that could be conveyed on the sign such as this. This is not a sign that will be flashing. It's a sign that has a digital readout. We will certainly present information primarily through Mr. May about how that information will be conveyed. Obviously, if there are conditions you want to attach to it, time frames we propose, at least initially, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. But if there's time frames to be more appropriate that the zoning hearing board would feel that would be necessary, we certainly will work with the borough and the zoning hearing board on that aspect of it. But getting back to the original sign, it's important in this day and age to have information conveyed to the public about all different kinds of things. And of course, we have other means to do it. Nobody's saying this is the exclusive method for doing that. We certainly have email blasts. We have the website, social media. There's certainly a lot of ways that information is conveyed. But one way that's easily conveyed is something that's literally graphic out in front of the building. And this is what we'd argue, a tastefully designed and appropriate sign for this type of use, and one that will stand the test of time. Mr. May will describe the anti-graffiti paint that's being used on it, other features of it that make it tough and will withstand the elements and all that type of thing. You may know, you've seen perhaps in other school districts, not to say that we do the same thing, but this is for a point of reference. The Pennsbury School District, for example, out front of its building on Hood Boulevard, there's a sign of this same nature. It's across the street are residences, as we have in this particular case. If you drive on Langhorne Yardley Road west towards what's now the Maple Point Middle School, which also houses the Neshaminy School District administration offices, on that road is a similar sign. And again, across the road from that is a residential area. So these signs are not meant to be disruptive, but actually to be helpful and instructive. We'll talk briefly about the board's decision to engage in this process. And in addition to that, by the way, we're also proposing an addition and expansion to
a flagpole out front. And that'll be all demonstrated on the plot plan that Mr. May will walk you through a little bit later in the hearing tonight. So hopefully you will see that this is a win-win for the district and the borough, because the borough certainly will work with other public partners, whether it's the fire company, the borough, if there are certain types of messages that will be helpful and consistent with school board policy, I guess Amber Alerts, things like that, that would be something that would convey instant information that would be helpful to everybody in the community, or emergency closings or tornado alert. I'm just throwing stuff out. But again, something that would be helpful to everybody in the community. This is a means to communicate this information. So with that, unless you have any questions of me, because I'm not testifying, I'll move first to our witnesses unless you want me to answer any other questions.
That's fine. Would you like to swear all your
Yes,
witnesses in
sure.
at once, just so we don't disrupt flow?
Gentlemen, if you could stand up and just be sworn.
Can I know your name first, please?
Damon, D-A-M-O-N. Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R.
Jason Harris, J-A-S-O-N-H-A-R-R-I-S.
David May, M-A-Y.
Not to be confused with David Ney, who was a member of the council here. So I want to make sure that that's clear.
Do you swear testimony you're about to give tonight? The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Great. I'll first call Mr. Miller. How would you like me to do this? To pass the microphone back and forth? Is that the best way to do that? Or
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing the podium. If
no,
it's,
that's
if
fine.
it's-
Good evening, Mr. Miller.
Good evening.
You've been sworn. You are the board president of the school district of the borough of Morrisville.
Correct.
And how long have you been in that role?
For almost, for about 6 years.
And in that capacity, were you in attendance at a meeting in May of this year when the board took a vote to authorize the purchase of the sign and the proceeding with erecting the sign, subject to, of course, to the zoning hearing board permission to do same?
Sure. Yes, we voted on the motion at our May 23rd, 2018 meeting. I could read the motion for you.
Sure.
If you'd like. A motion is in order to approve the purchase of a marquee from Stewart Signs and to approve Carrot Top Industries to complete the flagpole project for a total not to exceed $32,000.
And the actual price came in less than that, is that correct?
I believe it was around $29,000.
Not that it's necessarily relevant to today's proceeding, but you did proceed through the bid process through CoStars, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Let's talk, even though I'm sure the zoning hearing board knows this, but we want to establish the record. How many operating buildings does the school district now have for purposes of educational activities?
We have two. One over on Grandview Avenue is our elementary school that covers grades K through 2. And then our intermediate and middle and high school is the one that's on Palmer where the sign would be located.
Now, on that building, the second one you described, that's a much larger building in the district, is that correct?
Correct.
It houses the administration as well?
Correct.
So if there's information about district issues, in fact, that the school district board meetings are held in that building, is that correct?
Correct.
And committee meetings are held there?
Yes.
So that's essentially the nerve center for the district. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. Now, attached to that building on the outside at the top, kind of near the middle of the facade facing Palmer Avenue, there's an existing sign, is that correct?
That is correct.
And your discussions with Mr. May, how far off the ground is that sign?
My understanding, it's about 26 feet off the ground. It has to be reached by an extension ladder.
Okay. And how often is information changed on that sign?
Once a month,
Okay.
if that.
And in your capacity as a school board president, you find it sometimes, and the other board members find it frustrating to convey information in a more timely manner through signage?
Yes, and I've received phone calls or emails from people at times asking, how come the sign hasn't been changed because it's a new month.
Right.
More so in the wintertime when it may be difficult for an employee to get out there with a ladder to change it like in the middle of February.
So that sign has to be changed manually, obviously?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't ask you before, but the vote to approve the motion that you just described in May, what was the vote tally?
The vote was 8-0. We had one member who was absent.
Okay. Now, the sign that's currently attached to the building is obscured partially by some trees that are there. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. In the last several years, as technology has improved, the district conveys information through different means, the website, email blasts.
We don't have email blast, but we have a phone blast. Phone blast, and through the website, we just started a Facebook page for the district just this year as well to start conveying some information. But I would just say that school just started, and I know that we had, maybe Mr. Harris can even testify to this as well, that there are times when people don't update their phone number or address or whatever, we do still send out letters as well, that not everybody gets these messages. So you mentioned before about the school closing. We're going to be having a half day tomorrow. For those people who may not get that message, we would be able to have that out on a sign starting this evening for them to see it, as well as when they drop their student off in the morning.
Now, I mentioned in my opening remarks that other districts have digital signs. Are you familiar with some of those?
I'm familiar with both Pennsbury and Maple Points.
Okay. And you already described the school closure issue with respect to the heat issue. What are some of the other messages, in addition to just general scheduling issues, that would be or could be conveyed on a sign like this?
Obviously, school delayed openings. If by chance someone didn't get a phone blast, if school was closing early is another one. But also school events would be one. Back to school nights would be another one. Honestly, there's probably different items that go on in the school that would receive some publicity that would be helpful to the public, I believe. I know that there are times when people just don't know what exactly is going on because they don't check the website, or they may not necessarily be on social media or get a phone blast.
Now, this is, and Mr. May will describe the sign in more detail. This is a sign that does not have a flashing message. Is that correct?
Correct. My understanding is that the sign would be static. The only time it would flash would be when it was changing from one to the next.
Okay. And I did mention in my opening remarks, other messages could be conveyed that might be community related. I mentioned an Amber Alert. Other examples you could probably provide better than I could. What could those be, perhaps?
I would think that also, if by chance, I know that at times the borough does put out a winter storm effect, where parking isn't allowed on streets and stuff of that nature. That would be another option. You mentioned the Amber Alerts, or if there was some sort of storm warning or whatever. I would be more than happy. I'm sure the board would as well. And if we have to change policies to make sure that that can be reflected, to work with the borough and making sure that those those signs are posted.
I don't think I have any other questions for you. You may have, somebody else may have questions for you, unless you have other remarks you want to provide that I didn't ask. The only other thing that I would mention is that we do plan on, this has been in discussion for a number of years. This isn't something that just happened to pop up immediately. We've actually been discussing this in committee meetings, at our facilities committee meeting, for a number of years, off and on. We discussed it at our May agenda meeting, and we discussed it during the May business meeting where we voted on this. At no time did anyone from the public or did anyone from the board mention anything in regards to opposition to this. So I have a board vote of 8-0 that is in total support of this project. I have no other questions for Mr. Miller.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just ask, looking at the current sign, and I'm just first off looking at geometry and the requested sign size and height. Obviously, the sketch we have shows that the proposed new sign would be much lower than the existing static or passive sign that's mounted. Is the existing passive sign also 4 feet by 8 feet, approximately?
4 feet by 6 feet.
Okay.
4 by 6.
So the 4 feet by 8 feet that was selected is just because that's commercial off-the-shelf size sign, most probably? Okay.
Can I also just add, just for a moment, that have been discussing this for a number of years, as I mentioned. The reason why we're acting on this is because we actually received an email from the company that we had initially contacted, and they discounted the price of the sign. So we were thinking that this was a prime opportunity for us to act on it. Plus, we also had money from the sale of the Ryder building that we were able to apply towards this, because the money from Ryder has to go into our capital fund. We're not allowed to put that in any other fund. So we have the money left over from that sale to be able to apply towards this.
Okay, thank you. For the allowed, we understand the allowed in this district to be 4 square feet
For regular sign.
for
That would be
regular
another
sign.
variance. Obviously, we're requesting that would be that. The dimension itself would be.
Is a variance in and of itself.
Yes.
Right,
So we actually
okay.
have 2 dimensional variances, and I guess that one and the
The
perpendicular.
perpendicularity piece,
Si-
okay.
Size and
Size, okay.
Location.
Square footage
Right.
and
Yeah.
perpendicular.
Okay. Does the district have a proposed hours of operation that, I mean, rather than us trying to apply conditions, if we decide this is something that's favorable and saying we want you to operate it between the hours of, 1 PM and 1:01 PM or something?
I think the.
Something very reasonable?
I think your current electronic signage regulations are between 7 AM and 10 PM, if I'm not
That is correct.
mistaken. And we would certainly would want to comply with that. The earlier, obviously, in the day would be helpful, because parents and children would be arriving, certainly for high school, fairly close to that time. So it'd be helpful to have a message out early. In terms of the evening, I'll defer to Mr. Miller as to what, how late it would be helpful for the district to have it run.
It would be rare that an event probably goes past 9 o'clock. And so, I mean, anything that's posted past that time, it's probably not that.
Yeah, understand. My main concern here is just we have a somewhat brightly illuminated sign, which is certainly in essence a change to the neighborhood, no doubt. And would that illuminated sign bother neighbors after dark? And in particular in the wintertime, after 7 or 8 PM or I'm just talking out loud and thinking with all of us here, is that a better time to possibly turn it off so we don't bother people in the neighborhood? Obviously, the 10 PM cutoff is for an industrial district along Main Commercial Route 1, so there are some other considerations there. So I understand you're willing to work with us if conditions are to be made.
And to that purpose, that being perpendicular, actually, I think will at least lessen the impact on any direct illumination on any of the houses across the street. Plus, at the building itself, there are lights that are on overnight. I don't mean to say that we would leave, but certainly lights attached to the building are on overnight. Is that correct?
Correct, yes, as well as the street lights and everything else.
There are floodlights and street lights and other things.
And Mr. May can provide more of the detail about the sign itself.
Oh, that's fine.
Aspects.
That's
But
fine.
It's certainly, we've touched on some of those issues here.
And as you've already said, there's no intent for this to flash like every 30 to 40 seconds, a new message, the dance is this Friday night, the next ball game is, blah, blah, blah.
There's nothing that's going to sit there and say, concert tonight, concert tonight,
Right.
concert tonight, type of thing. There's nothing of that nature.
Or rotate through events continually. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, the capabilities of the sign, I believe, can scroll or go off and another one pops on type of thing. So I would say that whatever is probably the least intrusive.
Right.
And probably maybe even a scroll might be better, because that way it doesn't go dark and then come back up again.
Right.
Whereas if it was a scroll message, you've got one that scrolls on, and as the other one is scrolling off, and the other one is scrolling on, so the illumination stays more constant.
basically
So that it's-
constant in
right.
terms of lumens emitted.
Correct.
Unless there's different colors, then that can give you some strange effects, perhaps. And herein, it's not to try to limit the benefit of the sign. It's more to try to not drive the neighbors bonkers with, this new illuminated sign. Given what you've stated so far, I don't really have anything else myself. I'll turn to the other board members and ask if whatever they have.
I personally would like to hear more details about this sign.
Sure, go ahead, Suzanne.
No, I'm from.
You'll just wait for
I'll
the
wait
other
for the other
witnesses.
testimony. Oh, I'm
That's
sorry.
fine.
Oh, sure.
That's fine.
Sure.
Is
Oh.
that off the record.
Yeah, we can consider that off the record. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
So you have, no one has any questions for Mr. Miller then at this point?
They might come up, but I kind of would like.
Okay.
I'll be more than happy to answer
And
any
we
questions
can call him
afterwards.
back up. He's not that far
I'm here all
away.
night. Thank you.
I have no questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
This time I would call Mr. Jason Harris, who is the superintendent. Mr. Harris, you've also been sworn. You've heard Mr. Miller's testimony. You would adopt, at least for the most part, if not its entirety, this testimony is yours. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, you've been working with the district for how long?
2 years as the business administrator, and the past 2 months I've served as the superintendent of schools.
Okay. So you have a day-to-day knowledge of the goings-on in the district. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In fact, you're responsible for the day-to-day oversight of the district. Is that a fair statement?
That is correct.
Okay. And so you're the point person in the district ultimately for issues regarding scheduling changes, communication with the board, communication with the public, emergency issues, or anything of that sort.
That is
correct. Okay. And we've discussed the different ways of conveying information. Would you agree with Mr. Miller's description about that, the website and the phone blast, things like that?
Yes.
And are there at least times when information, even though you've conveyed it as much as possible, somehow still does not get to the intended recipient?
Absolutely. And I would say that one of our largest difficulties is our scheduling change. If we were to make an early closing or an early dismissal or a inclement weather postponement of school, or a change in a date for a board meeting, or a change for a concert or something like that, many times it's very difficult to get that word out at the last minute. There are reasonable ways that we do it through phone blasts and backpacks. Teachers send it home with their Friday folder and what have you. But to have, if there's no one at the building to receive students or to direct the public that there had been a change, the sign in the committee's mind and also in my mind when we planned it would be that final stop. You know, instead of hanging the handwritten sign on the door saying "Go home, meetings tomorrow," it's now in print and you don't even have to get out of your car.
And the sign itself is computer controlled. Mr. May can talk about more of the details, but the way the messages are listed and or scrolled can be done internally, consistent with whatever conditions might be imposed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And in your experience, you've worked in education for several years in different districts, both in New Jersey and in Pennsylvania. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In fact, you're a former school board member in Bensalem. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you have seen these similar signs to these in other school districts. Is that correct?
I have.
And have they seem to be an effective way of communicating information?
I will tell you, I'm a parent of three, a college student, Bucks County Community College, a junior, Bensalem High School, and a sixth grader at Belmont Hills in Bensalem. And every time I drive by their schools, there's some type of communication, and I say, "Oh, I didn't know that." And I consider myself a plugged-in parent. And it's difficult to sometimes get the flyer home out of the student's book bag. Most of the time they end up in the storm drain or in the trash can. And one of the difficulties that we're looking to overcome is using those signs. And I've seen participation go up in other districts because of those reasons.
And the signs are for the benefit of students, parents, and community members. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we talked about some of the potential messages. I just thought about some other ones, too. For example, scheduling of SAT tests, if that had to be rescheduled for some purpose. Or applications for attending the tech school. Would that be another one?
Absolutely.
Or deadlines for making other applications. Those kinds of things could be conveyed that if for some reason the student was not able to get the information through these other means, there's at least one other supplementary way of conveying the information.
Additionally to that, we did a phone blast this evening for Financial Aid Night, which is the September 13th for anyone who's watching in television land, at 7 p.m. in the LGI. We do our phone blasts weekly, and one of the difficulties that we do have is folks who are not plugged into our community with the phone blasts and social media are are rarely informed of issues or resources that are made available to them. So that financial aid night is not just for Morrisville High School students. That's for any student who is in Morrisville's residence. If they go to Conwell-Egan, if they go to the tech school, if they go to a charter school, they're welcome to come and hear that same information, because it's the same information whether you go to that school or ours.
And that information, for example, for financial aid, is critical to some students in this day and age, given the issues with student debt, some of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. I don't have any other questions for you unless you have anything else to add at this point.
I have nothing to add.
I do have a question, and it's not related to the sign part of the application. The flagpole, the replacement, now, is that existing flagpole a 40-foot flagpole?
I would defer to Mr. May on that question.
Okay, well, we can wait. We can wait till Mr. May's up. That's fine. That's no problem. I was uncertain about that part of the application, though. That was all.
Certainly.
So, does anyone else, any folks have any questions for Mr. Harris while he's up?
No questions. It's time.
I'm withholding Mr. May's.
Okay. All right, I guess that concludes Mr. Harris's.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. May will come up.
Okay. The man with all the info we
All
see.
the other information that you haven't heard yet, or at least you hear more information about. So, Mr. May, you have been sworn to testify, is that correct?
Yes,
And your position with the district is what?
operations director.
And how long have you worked with the district?
With the district, approximately 28 years.
And you're a resident of Morrisville Borough as well?
Correct.
Okay.
Can I ask you to speak into the microphone?
Sure.
Thank you.
You don't speak as loudly as I do. Okay. So, you heard the testimony of Mr. Miller and Mr. Harris about the basic needs for the sign and some of the other issues. The current sign, do you agree with their testimony? Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And just to describe a little bit now, what does it take an employee who's assigned to change the current sign? Tell us about that process.
Well, if the weather's good, you have to take a 32-foot extension ladder out. You have to put the ladder up. Once you get your ladder up, you take the old letters down, peeling the tape and the letters that are up there. Then you spell out your new message, tape it, carry it up the ladder, slip it into the track, and tape it to hold it in. And the tracks are they're broken. The sign itself is cracked. It's severely weather beaten. It's been up approximately 30 years. So the plastic is well used up by the sun and is very brittle, as well as the letters. So in the wintertime, there's approximately a 4-month period that it's very difficult to change the sign.
Let me interrupt you. That's right in the middle of the school year, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That would be December through March. It's very difficult to change. In some cases, it'd be almost hazardous to change it, so we just leave whatever messages are there up.
Now, let's talk about the new proposed sign, and we'll also talk about the flagpole, too. I don't want to forget that. And if do you have a mock-up of the sign available? So that not only the board, but also anybody in the public can take a look at that. I think I have a copy here. Do you have a color one or a black and white?
No, I have the black and white.
Okay. Perhaps we can mark, if we mark this tonight, would that be applicant A1?
That's fine. A1.
Okay.
Pull that off.
Joining what's been marked as A1, Mr. May, could you hold it up and show the board, and then it can be passed along to board members, and of course, members of the public can see it as well. Just kind of briefly describe, first of all, the dimensions. This is one side of the two-sided sign, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And the top portion, saying Morrisville School District with the bulldog, always stays the same. The
Is that,
bottom-
I'm sorry, is that illuminated by LED lights you said earlier?
Yes.
Okay.
That is, has the capability of being illuminated. The bottom portion is your message board. The sign total height is 7 feet 6 inches. That's the pedestal from the concrete, the pedestal up to the top of the sign. The sign itself is 4 feet by 8 feet. All the painted surfaces, the base and the end caps, they're all power coated, and they're with this powder coating, it makes it graffiti resistant. The sign portions have a plexiglass that's Macolor. It's made by Sheffield. It's virtually indestructible. If you go online and watch the video, you'll see the fellow beating on the front of the sign with a baseball bat, and it doesn't mark from mark. The sign will not fade, chip, discolor by the sun. All of that will not take place with it.
Now, going back to the old sign for a minute, is the old sign currently illuminated?
Yes, it is.
Okay, lights shine up onto it?
No, it's backlit.
Okay.
And has 3 sets of 2 fluorescent light bulbs.
Do those bulbs stay on overnight?
They do.
Okay.
Well, they're on a timer.
Okay. But there are other lights that are attached to the building that stay on
All night,
all
yes.
night. And there are street lights out front as well that stay on all night.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct? Getting back to the new sign, and we'll have that published to the board in here in just a few minutes. Let's talk about first of all, the area that's where the message is conveyed. That's 2 feet by 8 feet. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. How is that message, first of all, created and then controlled?
Well, it's all computer generated. You control the entire, there's a Cat 6 wire will run out to it.
Mr. May, can you, use the microphone, please?
A Cat 6 wire will run out to it, and that's what operates the sign. You can, it'll be hooked up to our internet network where we can access it, in emergency situations. You wouldn't have to be on site to access and change the message of the machine.
It is encrypted, however, though. Is that correct?
Yes.
I was going to say, I won't even ask about cybersecurity.
But
We were
I can see now.
anticipating that because obviously it's a concern.
Yeah,
We understand.
Snowden has hacked into our sign,
Right.
well, in order to hack into this sign, they would have to literally hack into our entire network. And
That's,
Now, the purpose for having it perpendicular is so there's messages on either side. Is that correct?
yes,
So the folks can see it in either direction, but it doesn't face the houses across the street. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And as far as the signs, the base's location, where is that relative to the sidewalk? What's the distance from the sidewalk? And we can show
It's,
that. Just use the mock-up or the plot
the
plan to
front-
use that.
The front edge of the sign. The front edge of the sign is 25 feet to our sidewalk. Then across our sidewalk is our parking area, which is another 20, which includes our sidewalk, is 25 feet to what would normally be the curb line. And to the center of West Palmer Street, it's 75 feet. So the actual offset, it is 50 feet onto our property.
Now, you've heard Mr. Miller and Mr. Harris both talk about the type of information to be conveyed. This is something that could be done and changed, like you said, remotely and in real time. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, are you familiar with any other signs in the borough that at least have similar type of characteristics and qualities? And if you do, where are they located?
The only one that has a message board that I'm aware of right off the bat would be Jules Tires
On Bridge Street?
on Bridge Street. And then there's various businesses that have them in their store window facing out.
Now, in fairness, those are in different zoning districts, is that correct?
That's correct.
Although Jules is near some residences as well, is that correct?
There's residents directly across the street.
Okay. If I could, I'll go ahead and, by approach, at least.
Please do. Thank you. You know, at this point, we have those in our packets. If you want to circulate those to the public, the residents, that's fine. I'll put this right.
Yes.
Eventually, that's not in the original point.
Anything else you would want to add to the discussion or the description of the sign?
No, I'm willing to talk about the flagpole.
Oh, that's right. Okay, let's talk about the flagpole. First of all, there is an existing flagpole, is that correct?
Yes, the existing flagpole is a 40-foot pole, and it requires chipping and painting and, regular maintenance. The new pole is a spun aluminum pole with internal halyards, which in a school district is a beneficial thing.
And what's the height of the new proposed flagpole?
40 feet.
40 feet. So it's not different from what you have now. That one.
No.
The base, is it somehow different though from what your current base is?
The current base is just a concrete foundation into the ground. As you can see by the drawing, this would have a 12-foot circle.
I see.
Would have a 12-foot circle and a walkway to it. It's to enhance the appearance and make it more presentable for when our kids have graduation ceremony, and it gives everybody a good spot to be instead of crowded around bushes and trees and that kind of thing.
Understand. So for the flagpole itself, form, fit, and function is the same as the existing. You're just replacing with aluminum, no change. You're putting a 12-foot apron around it with the sidewalk, there's no variances involved in any of that, just to establish it for sure.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
I have no further questions of Mr. May, and I have no other witnesses to present, but obviously you may have some questions. So.
So who ultimately decides what messages?
Yeah, I was going to get to.
I think that's a question for the administration, probably Mr. Harris. I do. Subject to the board's communication, I would assume, too. If you'd like them to verify that, we could do that. But it's certainly it'd be a controlled list of people who would be have access and would be part of it.
Okay, that's
Similar to what, if I could make this statement, similar to what, as I understand it, and I could be corrected, to what we have now with the phone blasts and the website information. So I would assume it'd be the same circle of people as to do it now. So that wouldn't change.
I would also add that
Okay.
I would just also add that the messages would also relate to Grandview. There would be no sign over there, nor are we interested in putting a sign over there, but it would handle any messages, for example, what would be happening over at Grandview if there was a PTO meeting over there that particular night, back to school night, those types of events.
okay. For those that will be actually physically sitting at the laptop entering the data, are they like CAC PKI cards? So it's a secured computer. It's maybe beyond but I just to make sure no kid walks in one day and puts some stuff out there that's really interesting.
That discussion has occurred.
It's not too absurd to think about.
So we use Windows Active Directory. Each user who accesses our network has a unique username and password, and those security clearances are then given through our IT department. In general, there are two people who hold the keys to that kingdom, which is our director of technology and our network engineer. And I don't even have access to change messages on the website. I just tell them to go ahead and do it.
Okay.
And by our organizational chart, if I carried all those keys, I'd have a lot of jobs. So we take security very seriously, and additionally we change our passwords. We actually upset our board last week when we made them change their email passwords because we were always targets of cyber attacks, phishing emails that look like they're from a sender. Those things our staff is very aware of, and we keep reins on our security very tightly.
And to follow up on that, I don't want to
Don't jinx me.
invite any type of mischief here, but so far with the website and the phone blast, there has not been any type of security breach for that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, that describes, obviously you have an IT process, trained personnel, limited access.
We also have, from a board perspective, we have a public relations committee that has given the administration permission to go ahead and do these announcements. Everything goes through a process with us. I may be the superintendent of schools, and I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations, but it's the board that puts the policies into place that give us the parameters by which we operate. And we have a social media policy, we have a public announcement policy, we have several of policies that are available for public inspection if anyone has any questions.
In fact, those policies are available on the website. Is that
On the
correct?
website, www.mv.org.
And those are being constantly reviewed and updated as well. Is that
They will be in
correct?
the 900 series for community and additionally 800 series for operations.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Looking at my witnesses, do you have anything else you'd like to add? If I've forgotten anything, please let me know. Otherwise, we would ask you to accept our application. I know there'll be other people speaking, but we have now at least rested our case for this portion of it. So,
I just asked for one clarification.
Sure.
I believe it was Mr. Miller or one of your witnesses testified that the new sign will be 4x6. Your exhibit shows 4x8.
it's 4x8. Yeah,
It is 4x8.
I think
Yeah.
you said
the one of the building now it's 4x6.
Existing? Okay,
Right,
thank
yep.
you. I had new sign.
Yeah, yeah.
I apologize.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You do have a couple of questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have
please
questions?
do.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You want it from Mr. May, Ms. Zukowski?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Okay. On the plan that you submitted, it's calling out a 12-foot dimension for the sign. I know you're stating
No,
that the
that's the
sign is
pedestal.
4x8, but,
That's the pedestal, that the concrete foundation that it will set on.
okay. And then by this diagram, the kind of scrolling marquee, whatever, it's 2 lines of text, 1 line, more than,
It can be one line that is 15 inches. It can be 3 lines at 5 inches.
all right, so there are
It can be
some
one
options
line
in terms
at
of,
16 and a half. It can be one line at 9.4 inches, plus one row at 5.5 inches, 2 lines at 7.1 inches, or 3 lines at 5.5 inches. You can change the size of the font.
okay. Because I'm just imagining traffic driving by, the image is scrolling, now I'm going to stop because I want to see what else it says.
To address the stopping, the mainstay of the reading of this sign will take place at our arrivals and dismissal times, and our traffic is pretty much stagnant for about 35 minutes.
But your hours of operation of the sign could be
They could be later,
7
yes.
to 9
It
or
could,
whatever.
yes, and it will be later if that's your desire.
All right. What's the difference in level of illumination from the fluorescent bulbs of the existing sign and LED backlight of the school district name? Are they comparable?
No, it's two different illumination sources altogether.
Yeah, but in terms of intensity or brightness, if I'm the neighbor across the street.
The message board sign will be brighter than the current sign. I mean, what the exact looms are, I would have to,
How does the illumination on this sign, which is perpendicular to the street, compare with the street lights and some of the other lights that are?
it would be the same as what your LED streetlights are.
So the street lights there are LED, is that correct?
Yes.
In terms of functionality, I could see a benefit for the perpendicular orientation, but the community really has been reading the side of the building for years and years with the current sign. So what if you had an electronic sign that was mounted on the building or parallel to? Would it have the same effect?
No. The current proposed sign would reach out to more people.
In what way? I mean, if I'm used
It'll
to
be-
driving by the school and looking over and essentially reading the wall.
It'll be more noticeable being in the front yard versus attached approximately 90 feet from the street,
Right.
trying to read a 5-inch letter.
And then when the sign is off, that really only applies to the lower half. The school district, the Bulldog stays lit all the time.
No, that wouldn't. That would come on at a certain time in the evening too. You could make one light. You could make half of the sign light up at 4 o'clock and the other half not light up till 5 o'clock, or you could turn them off and on, off at different times.
Right.
It's fully programmable.
Okay. And then all of the planting around the existing flagpole goes away?
No,
Or just
no,
would-
those bushes would then be trimmed down lower and made more, just a better look for the landscape.
Is there a 12-foot diameter?
No,
I've never been to the
No.
flagpole, so
No, there's-
I don't know.
no, there's a small foundation that's
Oh, okay.
approximately 3 feet in diameter and 4.5 feet deep.
Right, okay. How deep is it?
How deep is
Is the proposed sign? I mean, is it 6, 8?
the center portion of the foundation? Would be 4 feet deep. That's
Front to back?
no, just the 2 feet. I believe it's 2 feet 6 inches.
Yeah, like I see 2'8" looking at the front elevation.
Yeah, and
But if I looked at the side
yes,
elevation?
and there's two inside. This is a solid cowling that you're looking at. There's 2 legs, steel legs, that are inside that cowling.
You're talking about in the pedestal itself?
Yes, in the pedestal itself. And that portion would be mounted into a concrete base that's 48 inches deep.
Yeah, but when I'm talking depth, I'm talking front to back.
right.
Like I'm driving by it, am I looking at 8 or 10 inches, or it's got a
Oh,
lot
the
of depth
width?
between
The
two
width
sides? The width.
would be 2 feet.
Okay. So 4 by 8 by 2.
No, in the drawing, I have it 12 feet. It would be 12, the base would be 12 feet long and 2 feet wide.
No, I'm specifically asking about the sign itself. It's 4 foot high, 8 foot wide, and
Yes.
it's 2.5 feet deep.
No, it's,
Are you asking if you saw, if you were
the
standing
width of the
looking at
sign,
Yeah, like how,
looking at it on endways,
looking at it on the.
it's 10 inches wide.
10 inches.
Looking at it
Okay,
endways.
all right. I think, maybe it. If you didn't get the variance for the perpendicular, would the school board still pursue it if you had to mount it parallel to the building?
I'd have to defer to the school board. I don't know. You would lose the effectiveness of having a two-sided sign in that circumstance. So, go ahead, yeah.
We discussed this option at one point in time, whether or not to mount it onto the side of the building or have it perpendicular to the street or parallel to the street. We felt that if it was perpendicular to the street, people driving from both directions would be able to get the information. If it was parallel, the only people who would see it is if they're directly in front of the sign, taking their eyes off the road, or if you're only coming up Cox, because that's approximately where it would probably be placed. So we're not reaching as many people. And again, it even allows for people who are going into our driveway to be able to, or coming out of our driveway to be able to see the sign as well. Whereas if it was parallel to the street, they would not be able to see that unless they drove by and again, take their eyes off the street. That was a problem that we always found as well with the old sign, because the letters are too small and you're unable to really kind of catch it while you're trying to drive by and see what's going on. The only time I ever read that sign safely was if I was parked in front of the school waiting for my student to come out.
And I'm sure you're aware that with the granting of the variance, it's the demonstration of a hardship, since nobody else has asked yet. How do you voice the hardship?
Well, I can let you do it, but the hardship, I think, is signage is increasingly important for public institutions and entities. Obviously, we've had a sign there for years that is well past its prime, given the necessity for real-time conveying of information and the description that other means are helpful but not always satisfactory. This has become an essential part of it, and denying this would be actually placing us back in a worse position. And the hardship is it's really necessary, as is demonstrated by the school districts that have used this technology as well. It's become a vital part of information conveying, frankly. Thank you.
Finish?
I guess, I just have a few more thoughts in terms of if there were to be conditions. Obviously, if we give very specific fixed hours or some luminous intensity value or something that's quite invariant and tough to change, and there is a problem, that would mean we'd end up coming back here perhaps. If we had some conditions that allowed, and there's some problems with this potentially, but if we allowed the code enforcement officer to come out, and if neighbors were complaining and they said it's just too bright, that we could adjust it to where the people are happy with the new luminous intensity that's set. So I don't know exactly how to write the verbiage. I mean, the fly in the ointment there is we get one neighbor of 10 that says, oh my God, it's too bright, and the other 9 say it's fine, but
I guess my suggestion, this is just a suggestion, since we've already determined, at least I think on the record anyway, that the streetlights, which are actually closer to the homes than this would be, extend a certain illumination level with their LED lights, that it would not exceed that illumination. Perhaps that's one possibility.
I understand the possibility that the existing lighting, whatever type it is, would provide enough masking, and that wouldn't make the intensity of the sign seem so bad as it all blends together. Is a real probability. I'm just wondering if there's some way we can write some variability into any potential conditions, and not meant to be onerous for reducing the usability of the board, just so that the signage, that we have some variability in case the neighbors really are upset about the intensity level. That's all. So, thank you. That's all I had.
Good. At this time, we'd like to invite the public to approach the microphone. If you have anything to comment upon, ask questions of the applicant and their witnesses, and it's either pro or, again, pro or con, or just comments in general. And if you'd approach the microphone, state your name and address, and speak as you may.
Thank you. I'm back. Georgia Sankmars. Do you want me to spell it again? Okay. 227 West Franklin Street. There's a few things. As far as the streetlights and a sign that is only this high and streetlights that are 20 feet high, there really is no comparison. You really can't compare the two. And the direction the streetlights are meant to illuminate the street, you don't know where this sign is. There are codes that do govern how bright things are. We actually had an issue a few years ago with the lights in the A field, and we had to call the borough, and that Mr. Seward was kind enough to make sure that they got adjusted because they were shining directly into someone's bedroom at night. So there are already codes in the book to govern that, but it's still not a comparison. There's a couple things. One is that we're talking about a 4x8 sign, which is the size of a piece of plywood. 2 feet of that is going to be the scrolling sign or whatever they want to do with it. That's not that big. They've got it set back. Can I come up here? They've got it set back far back from the road. Very hard to see, I'm sure. And if you know the school, there is a road that curves here. And when you're coming from this way, on both sides, you cannot see that school until you are on the school. You have approximately 5 seconds to look at that sign. This has got to be a safety hazard. People driving past that, wanting to read that sign, it just can't be very safe. You've got new kids, you've got high school students with cars, you've got parents driving by distracted with kids in the car, trying to see over. Not only that, the sign probably isn't even high enough, not that I would want it higher, because when you've got cars parked in the parking lot up here, cars driving by are going to have to look over the cars or the vans or the SUVs and see the sign. The sign really is for the school, which is fine. I have no problem. They've had a broken sign for what, how many years? Fix it. Fix it. If you have to go up on the sign, put it lower. Make it bigger. Do what you have to do to make that work. The purpose of the sign ordinances are to enhance the attractiveness and economic well-being of the borough as a place to live and conduct business, preserve and enhance the natural and scenic characteristics of a riverfront historic community. With all due respect, that sign is not very attractive. It is not going to enhance that community. There is nothing there that's going to make that community look better with that sign being there, in addition to the possible problems that it could be causing. I love the flagpole. I'd like to see it bigger. I like flagpoles. It just is not going to do the job. It's not attractive. I believe it's going to be a safety hazard. I don't like the lights. Lights are a problem. You've got houses. It's perpendicular. So it's probably not going to shine on those neighbors, but you've got neighbors here. You've got neighbors here that it will shine on. Pennsbury has a buffer zone of trees in front of the residential across from that. The Chamonix, I don't think even has any residential across from their sign, do they?
Yes.
Isn't there a tennis court over there?
There's a housing development, I forget the name.
I believe there's trees in front of it.
There's a house right on one.
So maybe I'm thinking of a different school. I'm pretty sure it's in Chamonix, but it's not quite the same thing. It's not comparable. We're also talking about school districts with thousands compared to just a few hundred students. I'm not someone who's going to say because it's always been that way, it shouldn't be a different way. But this sign is not going to help those neighbors. Those neighbors are working hard on their houses. They're upgrading them. They're renovating them. If you've been in the neighborhood, it's a beautiful neighborhood. That sign is not going to help that neighborhood. And I am concerned about the safety. You cannot see a 2-foot sign as you're driving by. Imagine, this is how big this, not 50 feet, this is about 2 feet. The entire sign is the size of a sheet of plywood. 2 feet. From that far back, with all those cars coming by. The last thing that just didn't make sense, there's all kinds of security, but we're doing it real time. How? Someone's cell phone? It's not really real time. The whole thing with Amber Alerts and tornadoes, that can't happen. You'd have to call that other person and have them get in there and go do it. You're not doing it from your cell phone, right? So Amber Alerts need to be done real time. Tornado coming in, hurricane coming in, that's real time. That has to happen right here and now. You know what we have? We've got sirens for that. No.
Thank you.
Am I allowed to ask a few questions of residential work? I don't.
I don't mind.
You can,
That's fine.
if you'd like to.
First, you're not a lighting engineer, is that correct?
I am not.
Okay.
And nor are you, right, Mr. Trula?
No, I'm a lawyer, and I have the right to ask these questions. So, and you're the one raising these issues, so I have the right to ask these questions. Based upon your testimony, would you prefer the sign be closer to the road than where we're proposing it?
No, not at all.
Okay. Now, would you agree with me with the sign that's now existing on the building, that for people to look at that, they actually have to turn their head 90 degrees to look at the sign? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have any information from any other school districts, Pennsbury, Neshaminy, any others, that's become a safety issue with the sign, where they are when people come and go to the district buildings?
Their schools are set up differently.
I'm just asking, but do you have any information at all about whether there's any safety issues?
Are you denying that having that many children walking and parents and the issues we've already had?
I'm just asking you the question.
Do you have any issues? Do you have anything that says it wouldn't be?
That's not the burden. Usually you have to tell us that there's some proof that it would be otherwise.
No,
That's
I
all I'm
don't.
asking.
No, I don't.
All right, well, I disagree. Thank you.
Okay. So obviously the board is not making a decision based on any legal information that I'm bringing to you. Had I known I needed to research that, trust me, I would have, and probably can get it to you if there has been. There's a reason that we have zoning laws, and there's a reason that the zoning committee meets, and that reason is the people that put in place, people like Catherine Panzetta, those zoning things to protect the residents from stuff like this. Just saying, leave me alone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Catherine, Kathryn, Panzitta, 401 Hillcrest Avenue. And I'll just start out. I can't believe I come to a public meeting and other people have to drag my name into it. But I will now state what I want to say. I am neither for nor against, now that we're in this part. I am a little confused about why the previous speaker came up and wanted to be a party. I came, and I live at 401 Hillcrest Avenue, and I came to a zoning hearing board for Park Avenue, and I asked to be a party to that. I did come tonight to find out where that is. I wasn't sworn in, and nobody ever told me I lived too far away, but in reference to her not becoming a party to this, let's go back to 3941 Park Avenue zoning hearing board. Now, on behalf of what tonight for the school is, if you do grant this, I would not say go facing to the street, I would say perpendicular to where you are. I think that the discussion tonight should probably stand out. If we're talking about LED lights, there's a thing about the candlelight. How much does that send? Where is the spread for that? I haven't seen anybody up there, and maybe the next person's smarter than me and wants to talk about light pollution, to say yes or no to this. Those are probably the words that should come out of that. You do have a flashing light that does sit down at Jules Tibers. Maybe that is an area that's zoned for that, and it's allowed for that. I can't figure out what their sign is. But it didn't take a rocket science tonight to see that you have 12-foot by 12-foot squares here. I just measured off from my seat over to her. That's 4 by 8 foot on the side. So if we want to put in comparison to what this is, the specs came in, it even told you what the face color was. Not too thrilled that the color's Bristol blue, but we'll take it as a color. It's illumination on where it falls out onto it. If I remember, when I walk up to the front steps, and I don't know if this little, because you guys confused me on which one was Palmer, I think I had to go up a few steps and then go up your main sidewalk, and then I went through a few more steps to get into your building. I think if that sidewalk has that little set of steps after I park my car in the front of the building and before the sidewalk, I don't see the parking spaces here. And that's why I'm saying this. I did look at this and say, where is it? I can see it's 25 feet. I can see it's 12 feet. I can see this is 39 feet. I can measure because I had to measure my backyard today. So I have an idea of what it is. For somebody who doesn't, you can take your 12-foot tiles and figure it out on what the size is. You're going to now sit and you're having conversations about, when I'm very happy they shared with what the technology is. I sort of know what illuminated signs are. I did have a secondary degree in marketing, so I kind of like look at advertising and stay in that. I also have a family member who controlled an illuminated sign. Just like when you're going down 95, she was the person that changed that message. So by speaking, I have a little general idea of how, and I'm not going to say flashing signs, illuminated signs of any nature work. You're going to ask them about, they shared with you with what their Windows authenticity is. Does anybody up there really know what that means? Does anybody know what that means in the way of cybersecurity? Our whole world now is on the cloud. You're going through cybersecurity. He graciously told you what the authenticity of their system is going to do. You have to throw out any idea that will influence your judgment tonight on security of somebody hacking into that sign. Because not one of you would probably go to major medical centers, banking industry. You're all going through cybersecurity and authenticity. And unless you guys are all experts on it, how are you can't put in a judgment in a zoning on how they control what happens on that sign. And if that sign gets hacked in, you'd all leave here as millionaires. The threat's out there to people in it, but we have to, I work in an industry that we're putting, you could probably have medical records out on the cloud. Unless you're all experts. And then how are you going to write that into a section for them? We have to accept the part we live in. I'm not sure about it, but the only thing I didn't hear is the key words. We didn't hear about light pollution. We didn't hear about candlelight emittance. Every other place has it, and I don't.
Luminous intensity.
Luminous intensity.
Do you know, like lumens per watt and candelas? And I mean, I could really go on and on if you'd like. That's why I brought up the possibility of conditions that specifically allow variability in the luminous intensity and adjustment, whether it's xenon, LED, I could go down a whole long list of lighting technologies.
Smarter than
too.
me. You got it.
But we don't, and I don't want to drill into that. And I maybe went, of course, outside, the periphery of standard zoning, just to try to establish so we understand what we have as a product that's being proposed for installation, and maybe how we can adjust any conditions that may be proposed. And certainly we understand we're land use. This is dimensional stuff. I mean, that's our little box. I just try to go outside it a little bit for understanding and to make sure that we have some mitigation against driving the neighbors nuts if it ever comes to that.
I think flashing in front
and I'm not
of you
saying it will. We don't want flashing signs. We don't want high-speed scrolling. And I think the testimony so far is that there's no intent to drive the neighbors crazy or do anything like that. So that's why I was asking.
I was going to ask that too. And like I said, I can't think of another place that has it. And if anybody brought up Jules' tire sign, it's sitting within a lot more feet closer to when you're driving coming into this town. You cannot use it as a comparison. And I'm happy all these other schools have illuminated signs. I'm not going to sit there and go figure out how far theirs are from the street in the section to compare. Maybe some other people that are going to speak are really good on that, but I know that's well out of my scope. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Panzita.
Good evening. Debbie Smith, 221 West Maple Avenue. First, for the record, I'll state that I'm speaking as my opinion as a resident of the borough, not as my capacity as an official for the borough. Thank you. I really have the same concerns as some of the things that were already stated and very clearly stated. For me, it took the schools quite a few years to get through a process of calming down the traffic in front of that school with signs, flashing lights, make people pay attention that the kids are crossing there. The parents were flying through there, and that was a big issue. Get them to pay attention, who's coming across those sidewalks, real important. For me, that is not a big enough area setback, and from my opinion, that's not going to, you want to catch the attention, that's the idea, but isn't that counterproductive as to why all that signage and lights and pay attention was there to begin with? This is a walking district. It is different than Pennsbury. So Pennsbury is on Hood Boulevard. It has a lot further setback on that sign. So, and there is a tree line. It's a whole different setup than what's happening here. That is not a main public street that a lot of other traffic goes down. It's mainly the parents dropping off their kids to and from school. It's mainly a little bus that took the kids there, or the people that live in that neighborhood that come through. It's not like it's hitting a lot of other people to get their attention if you're putting on that sign, there's a football game, there's something else going on in the borough they said they could put up there. So for me, that it just doesn't meet the requirement for me. If I lived across the street, I would not want that big sign there. I just wouldn't. I worry about that scrolling, whether it's fixed or it's moving. I know for myself, if I see that, I'm going to want to pay attention to what that is that's going to cross. And I'd worry more about whether that's going to affect someone not paying attention to the walking district of those kids coming across that street. I think that part's counterproductive. The other one, let's see, someone was already talked about, Jules Tires. Jules Tires is a smaller sign. It's in a commercial district. And it was also grandfathered in before that ordinance for that illumination was put in. So that's why that's there. That's a whole different ballgame than the other sign. The vital part of the information as a hardship doesn't fly for me. There's plenty of other ways for the school, as was stated, that can get information out. I am not against the school updating the sign that they have. If the trees are in the way, cut them back. That's a maintenance issue. Should have been done a long time ago. If it's not functioning properly, should have been corrected a long time ago, not now. But fix that. I have no problem with not making sure that the people get the information that they need. I just don't think this is the best avenue to do this sign in that close proximity of those homes sitting on that property the way it would be. Last but not least, and I know money really doesn't have an issue with whether you yay or nay anything, but $32,000 for this sign. Personally, I would put an ADA bathroom down at that A field first before I would do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Jane Berger, 90 West Maple Avenue here in Morrisville. Okay. Good evening. First, the sign that's currently there absolutely needs to go. The replacement is where I have some questions. This is the age of digital technology. It certainly is much more efficient. If the sign was 4 by 8 up on that wall and illuminated, as I said, the trees there, as was mentioned, and maintenance issue, you kind of trim it down. Being able to remotely take care of something digitally internally removes the safety hazards from dealing with this very old, antiquated sign, so it needs to go. I'm not convinced that the proposed sign in its location is the best answer, particularly when it's 4 feet and 2 feet is saying Morrisville High School. There's a beautiful sign that says Morrisville High School on the building. The purpose is to give information to people there. So do you make those letters smaller so you have 3 feet or more of information going, or you put the name at the bottom of the scroll if you need to have the name Morrisville High School on it at all. But if you're wanting to put information out, it would seem the most information, if you could get 4 or 5 lines. And I've gone by the decrepit sign that's there, and I've seen several pieces of information on it before you get into a scroll. If you can only have one item at a time and you're scrolling, I think you defeat the purpose of trying to give as much information out to the community as you can. So I got issues with some of the design as proposed. I'm not sure if the site was. I'm not good with dimensions, and I'll be the first to admit that. But the line of sight of where it's proposed with the cars in front and how far it is, and when you're going down the road, particularly the first thing you're going to see is Morrisville High School, because you read down. That's the way we're taught to read. So how much of the information are you going to see as you're going slowly, but you're still moving down Palmer Street? If the sign length is 8 feet, why does the base have to extend to 12 feet? Because it's 2 poles underneath. Again, I'm not a civil engineer or design engineer, but I just see that after hours it's a place where kids can sit, where K can be up on. That since the actual supports are not at the 8-foot edge, but they're inside, why couldn't the cement perimeter also be that 8-foot length and just as wide as it needs to safely construct it? So that was a concern. Because I go by there after times and kids sit on the steps, and you want to minimize vandalism opportunities, so you don't want to make it easy for the kids to stand up on a cement base to get to the sign. And I realize there are other ways that kids bent on doing something inappropriate could not have to stand on that. I've looked at the diagram, and I'm confused as why there's any discussion of the flagpole, because this is not in front of the flagpole. I think it's where the garden is, maybe on the other side of the sidewalk. But if it needs to be vertical, why isn't it farther up on what I would call the old E-wing? If you're looking at the school building, it would be over here. It's a clear area there, and it's higher up. If people are coming by in their cars, where's the sight line that makes it easier to see that as you're going by? So I'm not sure about the visibility. Looking past the cars and trying to go up and see the words from people coming in the street in their cars. I'm not convinced on the need for the 2-sided. but it definitely, they need to replace the sign. And I'm not convinced that it wouldn't work on the building being digital electronic and instead of 4x6, 4x8, and make sure that the sign is designed so that the main thing you see is the information from the school and not the name of the school. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Berger.
Does anybody else in the audience like to speak?
Yeah, let's wait and see if anyone else. I see some other local residents. Any of them want to speak? I guess.
Seeing none and hearing none.
And hearing none. If there are some rebuttals to some of the concerns that were voiced, that would be good, please.
Sure. I just have a couple of points that were made. One in regards to the visibility of the sign. The sign is proposed to be 3.5 feet up above the ground. It's also sitting on a hill outside the school off of the street, which is approximately another 3 feet or more. So the sign, the bottom of the sign where the scrolling would be 7 feet or more off of the street level. So it would be higher. It's not as if the cars would be blocking it that are parked in there. You would be able to see it as you're approaching. The other item that was mentioned is regarding that the sign would be stating that it was for the school. It's actually for the school district. Again, we mentioned that it would only be one sign, and it would be representing the district. It wouldn't be saying Morrisville High School. It would be saying Morrisville School District. And with all due respect, Ms. Berger, all students that hang out in front of our high school, possibly during the evening, are not vandals, nor are they looking for anything to do that would be disrespectful to the property. That's all I have.
Okay. Well, given the way discussions have gone, this may be for Mr. May, and this is to just further discuss and maybe run aground a few of the questions that were given here, or brought up, I should say. As far as, I will admit, without having actually shot elevations, it's a little worrisome to guess that, imagine we've got a row of vans, and I know right where that, I graduated 76, I know the whole place. So if there was a row of vans parked out front, with the current sighting and elevation, as people come around heading east or heading west, would they indeed have clear sight of the sign through the majority of their transit time? Or would the roofs of the vehicles that are parked there possibly block the sign? Without having shot elevations, I wouldn't be able to guess. It seems plausible that this would be okay, but I'd say that I'd certainly like to know that we, through true quantifiable survey or something new, that the sign was high enough that it would be visible if all those parking spaces were occupied. So that's a viable concern if this is to be installed. The current siting of it, I'll admit here, that specific location, I'm assuming there was some trade space of considerations, and that specific location was decided upon having looked at a far easterly location, a far westerly location, and then this more central location, and the pros and cons of each. I don't know. I'm just asking.
Back in November, I believe, there was signs out in front of the high school, 1, 2, 3, big yellow arrows. And they sat out there for a little over 3 weeks so that the people that were making the decisions on the location of the sign could pick the right location. One location was in front of the E-wing, which is closest to the driveway. The other is, number 2 was the location which is on the drawing. And number 1 was or 3 was the location in front of the existing flagpole on the other side. This location seemed to be the best for people, for everybody
I see.
riding on the street.
Did that include the height consideration as well?
Yeah, yes.
And was that conducted when vehicles were parked in the area where Mr. Smells was asked about?
Yes.
Okay, so you had done,
Due diligence.
due diligence with the design, trade space, and possibilities for configuration of how to site it and the elevation.
Correct.
Okay. All right, and then the last question I had was that Ms. Berger brought up is, and I can't imagine the foundating of this, it does actually show 12 feet?
That's correct.
Okay.
As you are aware, we have bricks from the MR Ryder School in back of the high school. At some point, we're looking to take down another building. When we take that building down, we would like to take bricks from it, intermingle the bricks, and they would be fill out the pillars on both sides of the ends of the sign. That's why there's a 12-foot to allow for the foundation to put, at some later date, put a brick surround to make it look more like the rest of the school.
So upon initial construction, there would be some pad that would be, well, obviously you've got a slope there, so it's going to be slightly elevated on the school end, more elevated, 1.5 feet at the one end at the highest, and maybe 6 inches above grade.
Right.
And then the plan is to box in with residual
brick
leftover
at a
brick
later date.
At a
yes.
later date.
Yes.
So that in essence, the final look of this would be a boxed in with brick
Correct.
effect.
Correct.
Oh, I see.
And brick from former Morrisville buildings?
From the former school
with
buildings.
with the keys, the keystones from the building.
Oh, okay.
To kind of memorialize the schools.
So the foundating, when done as a raw concrete foundation, is not going to be 2, 3, 4 feet out of the ground. It's going to be
no.
6 inches or so, and then maybe 1.5 feet at the most exposed end.
That would be
a lot.
That would be a lot at the exposed end.
Okay. Not a highly probable sitting area for the kids, but then again, Lord knows what the kids are going to do. That's a whole nother thing. So, okay, I thank you. That was what I wanted to inquire about. I don't know if other board members have other inquiries.
Just one last question, because a lot of the public comment was really related to design considerations. So I'm not sure who the question is best directed to, but is there flexibility in the design? Like, would you consider the amount of signage given to Morrisville School District versus the amount given to information communication, or this is it? I mean, not that it influences the application, but it might help the residents to think if their input could actually contribute to the design of the sign itself.
Are you asking that if the top part would be reduced or increased, and then the bottom part would be either reduced and increased? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, when the resident mentioned like how much of the footage is being given simply to a title.
Right.
And so is there opportunity for the school board possibly to revisit the look of the sign itself?
I would have to, there isn't, okay, because the company only offers the one style. So there you go.
So it
only
is
offers
what it is.
It is what it is. If the sign is going to be split of that nature, please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. May, but if the sign is going to be split where there's going to be a stationary sign at the top and a LED sign at the bottom, that is the dimensions for the top and for the lower half. They can't be adjusted.
Although the.
But the font can.
The size of the message can be, yes. So,
Right.
Trying to put 3 lines that are only 5 inches tall, I believe that was the dimensions, roughly, with 3 lines would be 5 inches high? Yeah, that's probably asking too much.
Right.
That's not, you're not going to get the message across. Go ahead.
And also, I wanted to just mention to the resident that commented about 30,000 for the sign, that total budget actually is inclusive of the new flagpole, the electrical, and the concrete work as well. So
I believe the sign
not,
was about 17?
Yeah, 17 and
17.
change.
Yeah.
So that total number is inclusive of everything.
Okay, I believe that concludes all the discussions, and I'll let.
At this point, the board will meet and make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Well, actually made the decision on the fly. Well, let's try to get the one we can. Yeah. Exactly. Oh. But she already moved this building. Is that what it is? Okay. Yeah, it's right, yeah, right up the. It's definitely, it's on the left, yeah. Mhm. Right. It's actually. Yep. Now, she's either involved or that's kids.
From these steps, that's but no, it's not. Because that's this is the E wing over here. So this is for the garden. So where's this?
Everybody, our assistant.
Another one that's for the garden.
That's what she said.
Garden's on this side of the side.
It wasn't much over.
Oh, that's right. You should ask them to approve. So there's the side there. Do you have proof? That's the side.
Right here.
There's the.
Last time I saw it. Maybe.
Because there's no garden over here.
Right.
It's even worse. It's got out of cars.
Okay, so the base steps are over here. See, I'm thinking of.
I'm not counting.
The main entrance to the school is
Yeah,
that's the side door. There's the
But you guys, you count the 5 things.
See, I was confused looking at the plan, exactly where it's going. I thought it was the same as two, but they didn't know any other site.
Yeah. I didn't think
Now, where's the current sign? It's behind the trees. It's behind the white man. See, I can't understand.
Okay. So here's, I mean, if that was the issue, the sign has to, it's open and it has to come down. Okay, here's the existing. Right, so I know that's the walkway, yeah. Okay, so there's the walkway, that's the main entrance, that's the main entrance.
Mhm.
The other side of that is where
No.
then it's the signs over
Oh,
there. See, I'm getting one. Of course, I thought it was right there, out here. Out there. Okay, so it's gonna be right here. So yes. Oh, with your that's the garden. Here's the existing sign. There it is. So there's the existing. This is where the this is double check.
Right.
I just don't. Yes.
They don't disperse it, right?
There's a debate. So I'm not just here to clarify. Right here, there's the existing sign. Right here, where there's a I'm trying to get along the web as long as possible. But right where this garden is kind of in the general area where the trees are.
There's a sidewalk.
Right in the back. Okay, now where they said you can't change it, we're giving them. Okay, so the. I mean, they should go over this side. Those sides. Yes, the general area. Side.
That's exactly what I was thinking. That's exactly what I was reading. Exactly the way I was reading. Oh, sure.
Will the flagpole be illuminated?
What's that?
Will the flagpole be illuminated?
I think there would be a light at the top. Yeah. Not like,
Because I'm talking
not at the ground shining up, it would be.
Well, seven others are supposed
To
to-
illuminate,
there's-
to illuminate the sign, to illuminate the flagpole, so they would be out.
They usually put.
Otherwise you gotta take it
We
down.
retire the flag every year.
Because it does not get taken down every night.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't.
I'm sorry.
There's a light shining on it.
It's been
I know,
snowstorms
that's-
and windstorms and
There are
everything.
issues.
That's
The sign,
$12,000
we've
for
had
flagpole.
personnel change.
I hate to see it out there in the rain.
No,
Without.
You mean for the flagpole? So, we'll still have the walkway, but. For the plans for graduation.
I have no problem.
With a flag the size of Morrisville.
Because that might, that needs to be, so it's already up.
That's a beautiful thing. So here's. So there.
Here's the flag. So the money goes somewhere. They have to, they got it. And it has to be put into the general fund. I suppose we should go to the 8%.
What's the name of Bill Fenimore?
You say,
Yeah.
these are the first set. Right. And if you're parking your car, you're parking your car. People are and they don't have the steps on because the security doesn't allow that. So
Since when do I work for him?
So even the heat, the next time. Right, so it's here.
She's gonna ask my next question.
Right, so it's not like they're But I don't care. I out. There was a problem. And that's why we needed, and that's a whole other issue. All these kids who graduated. From where? Who are they? What do you mean they all graduated? He graduated this year from State College. How old is this picture? This is when we did a signature. Wait, are they all Morrisville?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Is that what she's been? She's retired. Is she? I worked with her when when I first started. She's been a lot of places. That's what I thought.
She's a senior. He is junior. He's a junior.
Yeah. Basketball. It's all the others back Jerry's. I went to Olympia with that.
It couldn't have been that long ago because he only played. This was 2011.
He and his wife grew their own beer, so
And those girls were that old.
I know you're not.
Kids were that old.
Yeah.
Well, how old are you saying?
She's in Poland. She's even. I told her, I said, what are you doing? I said, yeah. I said, no, about Friday night. Yeah, I told her. She was crazy. Let's see. I've not received any texts from her.
And they that are closer to where other parents went.
She and her parents and I think another relative went over. It's an out.
That's all.
Right. But they flew to Krakow. They were going to Auschwitz, and then I think some of it was going to be played too. But the whole time's in Poland, the whole week. Like, I mean, I was in Hungary and Yugoslavia. That was
Yeah, you were down for the cheers. The Bulldog Hall, remember that?
No.
And you're going by to.
Right. Yeah.
In the same breath.
Well, I mean, some others may feel I mean, it's certainly worthwhile. I mean, it's not like you're going to say, okay, let's go. You know, it's like, yeah. I mean, right, yeah. I That was a lot. I wanted to go see a doctor. Somebody that
Do they compete?
Austria, knockouts in southern Germany.
You have a good, you have a big share. You're on.
Yeah.
She was for a few years back.
I was. Did you just get on and come back down? No.
Now I asked a question. I mean, you make sense. I should just announce that. I mean, we were very lucky that I could do to analyze that. Just to be able to
$843 was.
But I'd be afraid nothing would stop see, some people will go to. It's 500. I think it's 500 feet.
No, I'm sorry. Walking away.
No, why would you call her anyway? Just say somebody else. She's got here. But, yeah. She's so much like you. She's so much like you that it's almost disgusting. So you might not get just. I hope no. They say I hope you have someone. Just I yelled at my own father. I'm 61 years old. My father. I did have one. He was like.
Oh, is that right? So, yeah. Just on the block.
Everyone what? Yeah, but I was. It's a great deal. How did you start? Did you start this? I would, had I thought of it instead of Elizabeth.
So, people in the office, they were like,
And it's, so when you have to be one feet and she can be, that's what it's back. Just the things. So I know for Elizabeth. Did he see us?
okay. I don't know what's
You guys.
Oh, of course not. No.
I like that name, like Antonia, just Tony.
Woman.
My son's name is Dominic.
So how did you get your training?
So is there a Brianna? Are there Briannas in our class? Oh, good. She's a little older for that. What? In her class? In her graduate? No, in her graduate.
They weren't letting us.
Oh, do they? Oh, change. When do they start changing?
I was kind of, that's what I was like. Oh, yeah. Sure.
But it was really kind of the church.
She didn't take us, did you have just to come to, if they asked?
Because somehow people do. Three-seater.
Address their concerns.
And there are other two.
Because they did,
No.
we had
Yeah. For good reason.
but
To this day.
Penn State
Sure. One of my best friends, just now is retired FBI, he was with the FBI, not in Philadelphia, but first he pulled everything. He pulled up the next day. Yeah. I went to work. And he was exposed, he went right to the, yeah. He went right to the site, investigation was done about 4 years ago. He contracted liver cancer.
For what? For not-
Lucky thing for him was because of his exposure. He had to get this body scan.
Go down.
He got the body
Go down.
scan early now. Yeah, and
No, go,
he's
you
got.
have to go and go on the inside.
I mean,
We've got a brief So first time I walked on campus and there was still even because schools have written. Yeah, and they're like, taking the surrounding area. And there were the yellow jackets everywhere.
Sort of have a case of that.
All
And
the
I
children.
remember being in my
So
office.
you have
and
to just.
She got there by 8:15. And I remember I had NPR
That's what
radio.
he said, Liz.
And I just remember you're at 8:43, and Carl Castle.
We had Liz but
I'm excited, but there's a report that's a plan.
I don't know what it was like then, but
I made it so.
I got
Pretty like that, you know. Yeah, and then, yeah, and then 19 minutes later, it's like, okay, then it's like, okay, this is what really happened, there's another point. So, and then, of course, by then, cell phones was like, just keeping them in tight. Whatever happened. Oh, yeah. Yeah. My kids were 9th grade, 6th grade, and 4th grade. And, my young oldest was in the first year of 10th grade in March.
But it's not a tax
They
rate,
didn't
isn't it?
have the
Or is
next
that
game,
just?
and when they played the national anthem next game, that was a serious thing.
Is there a Keystone test every year?
That's all. Wow.
What is that? But it's not as the last.
A few days before that, yeah.
You take it at the school? She probably had an empty.
Right.
She's actually his teacher.
Okay, we'll reconvene the meeting at this time, and council will read some stuff to us here.
The board has met and made a decision. The variance of the applicant, the school district of the Borough of Morrisville, is approved as to the use and dimensional variances requested for the installation of an electronic message board, subject to the following conditions. And the conditions are in accordance with section 465-53 regarding electronic message billboards, and they are as stated. The words, symbols, or images displayed on an electronic message board sign must remain stationary for a minimum of 30 seconds before changing to any other words, symbols, or images. No flashing animation or fade in or fade out shall be permitted. Number 2, the billboard may only be operated between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. prevailing time. Number 3, the light intensity of all electronic message board signs shall be so controlled as to not create glare, hazards, or nuisances. The project shall be carried out and the use shall be conducted in a manner consistent with the applications, testimony, evidence, and representations of the applicant and its representatives at this hearing. Receipt of all permits and approvals from any agencies having jurisdiction over the same to the extent applicable must be obtained. Applicant shall pay all borough expenses related to the application to the extent not already paid. The applicant shall comply with the rules, regulations, and ordinances of the Borough of Morrisville, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the United States government, and particularly with the Borough Zoning Ordinance and Subdivision and Land Development Ordinance to the extent applicable, unless otherwise waived. Does the applicant accept these conditions?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
And I assume this will be reduced to writing, so we'll obviously have this for our use. I know Ms. Carlton will do that in a very
It will be
comprehensive way.
in a timely manner, yes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Carlton. With that, may I have a motion to either approve or deny the request for variances as read by Ms. Carlton?
I'm making a motion to approve the variances read.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. That's it.
Just a few housekeeping measures. And to address Mr. Truelev's question, the board has 45 days to prepare a written decision. Sometimes I do take 45 days or 44 days, so just a fair warning. The written decisions with findings of fact and conclusions of law will be mailed to the applicant. An appeal may be filed in the Court of Common Pleas of Bucks County within 30 days of the written decision. If no appeal is filed, the decision of the board becomes final. Having said that, the next board meeting is scheduled for October 1st, 2018.
And may we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
There's a motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I really want to talk to her.
I'm sorry?
Does that mean like you have to wait 45 days to get her to write it? And you have to wait for the week before you vote?
Or just to appeal it, so.
We're
not going to
No. It should not be.
Thank you very much.
During the football today?